Just over a year ago, I mentioned that the name of the Sherlock Holmes character, Professor Moriarty, was an anagram for I am Rotary. But did the author, Arthur Conan Doyle, encrypt this anagram on purpose? And if so, what does it mean? That Doyle included the anagram on purpose is hinted at in the story The Final Problem, when Holmes tells Watson that Moriarty once wrote a treatise on the binomial theorem. The term binomial suggests the concept of two names. But then the question becomes, why would Moriarty covertly identify himself as Rotary? Doyle gives some insight on that in his 1915 novel The Valley of Fear, where Moriarty and the crime syndicate of which he's a central figure are described in rotational terms. Everything comes in circles, even Professor Moriarty. The old wheel turns, and the same spoke comes up. It's all been done before, and will be again. Doyle is drawing up a vicious cycle that repeats indefinitely. But this is really just poetic philosophizing. The specific meaning behind I am Rotary goes much deeper than simply the metaphor of a vicious circle. Moriarty as Rotary represents thieves who use circulation to steal from afar. To understand this provocative idea, we need to do a Moriarty deep dive, realizing that the overall business of Moriarty's criminal syndicate was never really thwarted by Holmes or Watson. The presence of this syndicate was alluded to in The Final Problem.
You stand in the way not merely of an individual, but of a mighty organization, the full extent of which even you, with all your cleverness, have been unable to realize.
And Holmes never penetrated this syndicate any further than his confrontation here with Moriarty. In fact, Sherlock Holmes existed as an object of mockery with regard to the syndicate's real business, implemented via the workings of Rotary. And that's because Moriarty's real crimes targeted every locked home, the surely locked home from which Moriarty and his cartel could steal wealth safely locked up inside. This was Doyle's inside joke. Back then, when Doyle was writing the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, most people didn't trust banks. Not only did depositors face the risk of thieves, or the bankers themselves, stealing deposits right out of the vault, but during the last half of the 19th century, bank failures were rampant. Between 1863 and 1913, 8 banking panics took place in Manhattan, and more than 2,000 banks collapsed in the U.S. The public distrusted banks and tended to keep their money at home, under mattresses, buried in holes, or padlocked in strong boxes. And this brings us to the central, though veiled, metaphor of the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, the combination lock, in which a secret code of letters or numbers is used to unlock the mechanism.
Okay, the reason that the locking mechanism works is that if the latch can't rotate, then the shackle won't come out.
In order to open a lock, you need rotary movement. Moriarty is that rotary movement, unlocking the wealth seemingly protected within Sherlock Holmes. But there's another component inside that's necessary to open this lock, something called a cam. A cam is used to translate rotational movement into linear movement, which leads us to another clue in Doyle's work. According to Holmes, the worst man in London is a blackmailer named Charles Augustus Milverton, who identifies himself with his initials CAM. In this combination lock, the first cam is attached to the dial, suggesting that a cam can use information to unlock and access treasure. Charles Augustus Milverton, as a cam, used secret information purchased from disloyal servants to pry open the locks of the wealthy's stash of savings. So Moriarty and Milverton are the pickers of locks, even those that are Sherlocked. But again, this is all just metaphor. Moriarty and Milverton aren't actually breaking into padlocked homes. So what is going on here? The hidden disclosure of Sherlock Holmes is that smart villains don't need thugs or guns to steal your wealth. They only need deciphered information. In modern times, that information might be as simple as your account password. But at the turn of the 19th century, when Arthur Conan Doyle was writing the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, the important information was Moriarty's knowledge of the rotational mechanism of monetary inflation. According to Holmes, Moriarty wrote a treatise on the binomial theorem, which is an algebraic formula for the expansion of mathematical powers or exponents. Such an understanding lends itself perfectly to the mechanism of monetary inflation, which is explained here by the Financial Edge Training website. Inflation is usually quite simple to model. In most cases, we simply apply an exponential formula. Doyle tells us explicitly that Moriarty and his syndicate possess the knowledge that will rotate open the lock on everybody's savings strongbox, whether held in a bank vault or in a surely locked home. This is because inflation steals the people's purchasing power, a stealth way of stealing from them. There are two ways to get rich printing money. One is through counterfeiting, and the other is by inflating the money supply through the banking system. Counterfeiting is a crime that's easily understood, and Doyle's characters commit this crime a few times. In The Adventure of the Three Garridebs, Watson describes finding a counterfeiter's printing press belonging to a man named Evans. But counterfeiting is covered in more detail in Doyle's novel, The Valley of Fear, the only Sherlock Holmes mystery set in the U.S. It was published in 1915, just a year and a half after the Federal Reserve, the central bank that controls the country's money supply, was formed. The first part of the novel is called The Tragedy of Burlstone. The character Porlock, the opposite of Sherlock, uses the name Burlstone in a cryptogram that Holmes must decipher. The word burl is a rotationally descriptive term, meaning whirl. Later in the story, we learn that the character named McMurdo is counterfeiting. I was helping Uncle Sam to make dollars. Maybe mine were not as good gold as his, but they looked as well and were cheaper to make. This man Pinto helped me to shove the queer... To do what? Well, it means to pass the dollars out into circulation. In order to benefit from printing money, the money must circulate in circular flow. Circulating an increased money supply allows for theft on a much larger scale. Another mathematician known for his work with the binomial theorem was the real Girolamo Cardano, who lived in the 1500s. According to Wikipedia, Cardano partially invented and described several mechanical devices, including the combination lock, the gimbal, and the Cardan shaft, which allows the transmission of rotary motion at various angles. But what stood out to me was his work with hypocycloids, shown here, and that's because these Cardano circles were used for the construction of the first high-speed printing presses. The Cardano circle also resembles the symbol used by the Scours gang in the Valley of Fear. A few years after Cardano died in the Papal States, a German man named John Spellman introduced a specific kind of paper into England called Foolscap. Its name was based on the paper's watermark, a jester's head with his pointed cap and bells. Arthur Conan Doyle referred to Foolscap many times in the Sherlock Holmes mysteries. One notable reference was made in The Adventure of the Red Circle, when slips of Foolscap were presented to Holmes. If he wants anything else, he prints it on a slip of paper and leaves it. Prints it? Yes, sir, prints it in pencil. Dear me, Watson, said Holmes, staring with great curiosity at the slips of Foolscap. This is certainly a little unusual. Seclusion I can understand, but why print? Printing is a clumsy process. Doyle uses the word print, or a variation, 5 times in this short scene. In the story, the word print is meant to distinguish the writing from cursive, but printing could also mean the use of a printing press, rotary printing. So why might Doyle want to bring attention to rotary printing on Foolscap? This story, The Adventure of the Red Circle, was published in 1911, but 50 years earlier, during the Civil War, the Treasury Department of the Southern Confederate States was purchasing Foolscap as its banknote paper, following the lead of the U.S. Treasury. In an article from the website Society of Paper Money Collectors, we find information about the department's purchase of Foolscap in 1862. He stated, "We make and can buy paper of all kinds, as well as any London house, so we could execute your order for Foolscap loan paper." Court records seem to refer to this paper as banknote paper. Benjamin Franklin wrote a poem comparing different types of paper with certain types of people. For example, mechanics, servants, and farmers were like copy paper. A virgin maid was white paper, and poets were considered waste paper. Not surprisingly, Franklin linked Foolscap with retail politicians. In a similar vein, Doyle was linking Foolscap with the money printing of central bankers. The etymology of the word cap, a covering for the head, goes back to the word capital, which originally referred to how many head of cattle a farmer owned. The term Foolscap is telling us, quite literally, that paper money is fool's capital. But how exactly does fool's capital allow Professor Moriarty to steal wealth that's been surely locked away? The answer is not disclosed by Arthur Conan Doyle, but it is something I show in my book, Inflationary Fairies. In the story, a group of fairies form a central bank in order to complete an initiation task, that of stealing the wealth stored in the basement of Fayodale Castle, and without using fairy magic. So how is it done? It's somewhat complex and easier to understand if you read the whole book, but the oversimplified explanation is that a circular flow of inflated money created through debt that's circulating through an Irish shire, or any economy, will draw savings out from locked vaults in order to service the continually growing debt. An increase in the supply of fool's capital will increase prices. Once savings has been tapped and shoved back into the economy to pay these higher prices, that savings remains in circulation, circular motion, and the increased size of the economy is now large enough to pay the interest that a debt-based economy continually demands, once that savings circulates into the hands of those in debt. A few lines after McMurdo explains how counterfeit money is shoved into circulation, McGinty tells him, and really tells us, that there are times when we have to take our own part. We'd soon be against the wall if we didn't shove back at those that were pushing us. To better understand how exponential inflation and rotary circulation steals wealth from afar, please check out Inflationary Fairies. There's a link to the book in the description, and please let me know if you enjoyed this story. I'm grateful for any feedback. Please leave your thoughts in the comments, and thank you for watching.